Right, let's begin. Good evening, everyone. It's my pleasure to welcome you to the 9th webinar in our Selborne College and Old Selbornian Association webinar series. As you all, I'm sure, are aware, we're celebrating our 150th Jubilee celebration this year. So what a fantastic initiative, just to bring some old boys in from around the country, around the world, just to talk about various areas of industry, of professions, and hopefully give some advice and some thoughts for the current learners in Selborne College, and maybe give them some thoughts for the future. My name's Justin Sparg. I'm going to be emceeing, so to speak, and looking after the session this evening. I'm the head of accounting here at Selborne College, also a maths teacher as well. And yes, we're going to have fun just hearing about what some of our past pupils, some successful Old Selbornians, have managed to achieve in the field of accounting and actuaries. Okay, so we've been through all sorts of other professions and careers, but tonight actuarial science and accounting is going to be our focus this evening. If you have any questions that you'd like one of the panelists, or an open-ended question for any panelist to ask, or to answer rather, if you would just type it in the chat, and then at the end of the presentations and the chats, we'll be able to address those questions. I'm going to introduce our panelists this evening one by one. We've been told to go from the youngest to the oldest. The first person will then present a short little message and give them the history of their journey in either the accounting or the actuarial science industry, a bit of what they've been doing for the past little bit in their life and in their careers. And then after that, we will move on to the next one. Okay, so I'm going to introduce our first speaker. Our first panelist this evening is Mr. Mbathandwa Mbandlanyana, who matriculated from Selborne College in the year 2015. He was the head of the Norton House Hostel. He was a prefect in the Dutch of the school as well in his final matric year. He completed a business science degree in actuarial science from UCT in 2019, and throughout he was part of the Alan Gray Orbis Foundation program, and now he's a member of the Association of Alan Gray Fellows. Currently, Mbathandwa works as an actuarial analyst at Deloitte and has been working for just over 2.5 years. So fairly new to the trade, but I'm sure he'll shed some light on his experiences. Mbathandwa was raised by his mother, and he's the oldest of 2 children, and his younger brother also having gone through Selborne. Outside of work and studying for exams, Mbathandwa also enjoys reading, hiking, running, and exploring Cape Town, where he currently lives. So Mbathandwa is I'm going to hand over to Mbathandwa. I don't think we've got a video feed for him this evening, but hopefully he'll be able to share some thoughts with us now. Mbathandwa, are you there? Go for it, Mbathandwa. Okay, I think we're just going to move on. Maybe Mbathandwa will come right with the technology side of things. We are accountants, not into technology maybe as much, but I'm going to move on to the next person, and we'll come back to Mbathandwa a bit later. So next up is a past pupil of mine, actually, which makes me feel a bit old, but Mr. Rohin Jain matriculated from Selborne in 2014, a year before Mbathandwa. He was a prefect in his matric year, and he can still claim it that he achieved 100% for mathematics and physical science in matric, as well as a full house of distinctions across the board. He decided to pursue his undergraduate degree in actuarial science, also from UCT, and he completed this in 2018. He then completed his master's in mathematical finance, also at UCT. Subsequently, he's worked at the First Rand Group Limited as a graduate, where he's rotated through different sections of the bank until he's ended up at RMB. Rohin is currently an ex-VA specialist, not too sure what that is, at Rand Merchant Bank, and he lives in Johannesburg. In his spare time, Rohin enjoys playing squash. I testify he took a Coca-Cola off me a few years ago, and meeting up with friends and catching up with his favorite sports. Rohin, without sharing the squash and the story about you beating me, can you share us some details about your actuarial journey this evening?
How's it, Mrs. Fogg? Yeah. I was hoping you'd bring up the squash game. It's I've got better, so maybe we should have a rematch sometime again. But as Mrs. Fogg said, yeah, I matriculated in 2014, and just to start off, I think it's quite an honor to be asked to present today on my career so far. Not so much; it's just 2.5 years of working, but I think it's such an honor, especially seeing all the different panelists we have and all the talent that the school has produced. I think that's quite amazing. So as Mrs. Fogg said, I matriculated in 2014, and I just had a affinity towards maths and science and statistics and finance, and looking at the various career options. I found that actuarial science ticked a lot of those boxes, and I was persuaded into doing actuarial science at UCT. And as I was studying actuarial science at UCT, I found a particular course that I really enjoyed. It was financial engineering, or mathematical finance, goes by different names. And I decided, this is the field, or this is the area of specialty I want to really dig into. And as Mrs. Fogg said, I decided to do my master's in that field. At UCT, it was quite a tough year. It was a lot of work to do in a short space of time. But that enabled me to get a job at the First Rank Group. And if you haven't heard who the First Rank Group is, it's basically a company that owns RMB, Westbank, F&B, Ashburton, as well as a few other subsidiaries. And I was accepted into the graduate program, and which enabled us to rotate through different divisions of the bank. And I think that's a great way to sort of get a feel for the different parts of the bank and to see what you actually enjoy. My first stint was at Ashburton, the asset manager. I was involved in some data analytics, some fund management, and some asset allocation modeling, which was quite interesting. Then I moved on to RMB in the valuations team, where our role was to provide reserves or create reserves for potential risk events that might happen to the bank, in particular the trading floor. And thereafter, I spent a few months at the quants, who are in charge of developing the models and maintaining the models we have at the bank. And as I rolled off the graduate program, I entered into the funding desk. And the funding desk is like the liaison between the group treasury and the trading floor. And one of our responsibilities was to optimally allocate cash from group treasury to the various desks on the floor to ensure that we're building client relationships and ensuring that we're building enough profit in the bank. And most recently, in June this year, I got a job as an XVA specialist. And yeah, it does sound complicated, but the role of an XVA specialist is to price XVAs. And what an XVA is basically these additional costs that need to be accounted for in derivatives that need to be added on to the base price of the derivative, because these are actual costs of entering into these derivatives. So things like, the possibility of our counterparty, going bankrupt. This is a cost that we need to factor into the price of a derivative. So all these various costs is what I'm responsible for doing, along with a few other colleagues, and pricing these in and managing their risk. So yeah, I think that's about 2.5 years worth of work experience. I think some of the challenges I found at work was that it's a lot of pressure in terms of, you need to produce results often in a timely manner, because decisions need to be made quickly, and because big decisions are made on them, the results need to be correct, because we couldn't be making or losing money based on this decision. Another aspect I found challenging was the conflict management, which continues to happen. I think there's two parties on either end, and you're often responsible for keeping both of them happy. And I think that's a skill that's quite tough to master, and I'm still working on that. I think some of the rewards of working in this field is, the work is challenging, and I think understanding and getting a deeper insight into it in itself is very rewarding. And being put in these tough, difficult situations and upskilling yourself in areas perhaps that you're not so strong in is rewarding itself, as you sort of refining yourself and developing your talents. I think that in itself is quite a cool reward. Yeah, I think that's a quick summary of my career so far. Back to you, Mr. Spark.
Brilliant. Thank you, Rohin. I'll probably admit a few times over the course of the evening, there are certain words that I do not understand very well, but yeah, I might be sending some questions your way, maybe not tonight, over the days and weeks to come, to really clarify exactly what you do, but it does sound that you're doing a great job there, Rohin. So I know that I speak on behalf of the staff here that you still remember, and who still remember you, how proud they are whenever they hear of Rohin Jain. So keep doing what you're doing there. No pressure.
Thanks, Mr. Spark. Cheers.
I'm gonna move on to Mr. Yandisa Kawana, who would have been a few years behind me when I was a student at Selborne. I'm trying to recognize him, but I think we've both aged over the past while, so maybe we'll meet in the next little bit and catch up. But Yandisa Kawana matriculated from Selborne in 2006 with distinction. He was a prefect in his matric year, and then moved on to UCT to complete his BCom in financial accounting. Thereafter, he started working professionally at PwC or PricewaterhouseCoopers in East London, where he completed his CA traineeship or his articles and qualified as a chartered accountant. After completing his articles, Yandisa continued working at PwC as an assistant manager in the auditing division. And then after 4 years of working at PwC, his love for problem solving led him into a transition into a career in management consulting, where he worked as a consultant for Bain & Company in Africa, providing end-to-end consulting for various listed companies across the African continent on their most critical issues and opportunities. He spent 3 years working in management consulting and mainly gained experience working in financial services and telecommunications. Primarily focusing on strategy development, performance improvement, and digital transformations. He then moved to Hollard, where he worked as a senior strategy consultant for the life insurance business, primarily focusing on strategy development and execution. After a number of years at Hollard, he joined the Sanlam Group, where he is currently working as a strategy manager for the Sanlam Group Strategy and Impact Office. Yandisa, that's quite a mouthful there. You've done a lot of things in the few years that you've been in the industry. Would you like for me to hand over to you and you share some thoughts with us?
Sure. Thank you very much, Justin. Thank you for the introduction. And also thank you to the organizers of these webinars for the opportunity to participate in this panel. I think this is a great initiative and one that should definitely keep on going. And good day to everyone at home watching this webinar. I think, as you've heard from most of the other panelists, not only today, but I think in the previous sessions, most of our career stories really start at a young age with a passion and an interest that was sparked by something as you kind of go along. That ultimately leads you to the story of your career. And I think mine is no different. And I'll probably start from a very young age, although it's easy for me to connect the dots looking backwards, although it wasn't as clear when it actually started. But for me, growing up as a kid, I think up until midway through primary school, I had a really bad stutter. So this made it quite difficult in most of my classes, especially English, and having to do orals. And just having to speak in front of my fellow classmates was difficult. So for me, the one class that I would always look forward to was mathematics, because you never really had to speak. You just had to make the numbers right, and they would ultimately speak for you. So unsurprisingly, going through high school, for me, my favorite subjects were mathematics, accounting, and to a lesser degree, science as well. Because for me, these allowed me to really build the core foundation of problem solving. And I think the important part that I'll speak about as I speak about my journey is really around foundations and the importance of just laying good foundations. And with the foundation that was laid for me through high school, I decided to go to the University of Cape Town, where I studied for a career towards becoming a chartered accountant. After that was completed, I moved back to East London, where I worked at PwC. It was quite a good experience as well, given that there were also quite a lot of Selbornians working with me. After completing my articles, as mentioned in the profile, I worked briefly as an assistant manager in the auditing division before my passion for problem solving really then ultimately led me to a career in management consulting, where I worked for Bain & Company for 3 years before deciding to join internal strategy teams, first at Hollard and then now at Sanlam. And I'll expand a bit later about management consulting and sort of what that career entails. But I want to speak first about the foundation that the chartered accountant profession gives you. I think for me, training to be a chartered accountant really does give a great asset in building your career, regardless of where you end up. I think laying those foundations, being able to learn about auditing, finance, accounting, tax, law, economics, all of these are fundamental parts of how an organization operates, and really does equip you with the right tools to build on your career wherever you decide to end. So for me, that really that's what I was able to gain from firstly studying to become a chartered accountant, and then also through my articles and my learnership through PwC. Then with that foundation built, once again, this was able to propel my career into management consulting. And to give a brief overview of what management consulting is, I think at its core, it's simply just problem solving. So really, management consultants help businesses solve their most critical issues, allow them to maximize growth, improve their overall business performance. And this is mainly issues that are facing management of a company. So what should our strategy be going forward? Which parts of the business do we need to focus on? How do we improve our performance? How do we structure our business? And ultimately, how do we best serve our customers? So to give you an example, one of the projects that I worked on while I was at Bain & Company was there was a large mining company that we were working with in Zambia. And at the time, the company had major cash flow issues to the result where they couldn't actually pay the immediate debts as they arose. So they actually had to then prioritize between paying the utility bills, paying for their raw materials, paying the employees, or paying the regulators. So this was quite a complex problem for us to solve, because with each decision that you made, it meant that one of those four pillars wasn't actually going to be paid. But now the problem is, if you don't pay your utility bills, you don't have electricity to run your operations. You don't pay raw materials, you actually have nothing to sell to make money, keep the business going. You don't pay your employees, they probably won't pitch up to work, so there's no one to actually do the work. You don't pay your regulators, you don't have a license to actually operate. So we had to find ways in order to highlight this to the business, and also find creative ways in which to solve this problem for them. Apologies, my room has some sensors. So yeah, that was really one of the problems that we worked on. And ultimately, what I enjoyed during this part of my career was that we ultimately worked with in a wide range of industries. So as I mentioned, financial services and telecommunications were the two where I had the most experience, but I was also able to work in retail, in mining, and also work across different geographies. So not just across the African continent, but also work with colleagues from across the globe, learn from them, but also impart some of the things that we'd also been able to learn in the African continent. Also, our teams were quite unconventional. Mostly they included accountants, actuaries, engineers, medical doctors, all of them primarily learning different things, but all being able to solve problems and having different approach to how they solve the different problems. So for me, that really gave me a good foundation. And after that, I then decided to move into internal strategy teams. So first at Hollard, and then now at Sanlam Group. And my current role really is just an extension of what I did in management consulting, but it's just internal. So working on the problems that Sanlam faces. I won't mention any of those. I know we've got some old mutual colleagues here. And then, yeah, so for me, that's really given me that, going a bit further in more than just solving the problems and giving recommendations to management, but also being there with them in implementing and executing on the solutions that we've created. And this has really enabled me to work quite closely and to learn from executives in these companies, but also using the skills that I've gained and expertise that I've gained to help them solve their issues. I think really in closing from my side, there are many lessons that I've learned along the way, and I'm sure there are more lessons that I'll learn as my career progresses. But I think there are two things that really stick out for me. And I think the first one is really around, if I had to look back when I started my career and now, I think one thing that I didn't realize how important it was people. I think wherever you end up, you ultimately work with people, for people, to develop solutions for people. So I think investing in that element around understanding people, building your emotional intelligence, your EQ, as much as you invest in building your IQ and your technical skills, is actually something that's quite important. And for most of the people listening on this webinar, at Selborne College, you really have a good foundation. Things like playing sports, working on group projects and the likes really give you that core, solid foundation. And then the other thing, I've spoken a lot about laying good foundations, because I believe for me, this is an important recipe for success in whatever you choose. If you have a really good foundation, you can actually move into any career path that you need, but just focus on building the right foundations. And as I've mentioned earlier on, it's quite easy for me looking backwards now to say this is where I am and connect the dots of how I got to where I am. But it's a lot harder for you when you're looking forward. And I think it's well articulated by Steve Jobs. I stole it from Steve Jobs' quote, where he mentions that you actually can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backwards. So for you, you just have to trust that the dots will ultimately connect for you. And that's why you have to make sure that you've got the right foundation, so that whatever opportunity presents itself, you'll be ready for that opportunity. So yeah, that's it from my side. Thank you, Justin.
The dots are not always clear to find, but you got to be looking for the dots to find,
True.
Thank you so much, Yandisa, for that insight. We're going to try Batandwa again. Mr. Mbadlanyana, are you able to share your story with us now?
Justin, can you hear me? Can you hear me? Sorry, Justin. Okay, awesome. Thanks. Yeah, sorry for all the technical issues that have been happening. But yeah, I think Justin already read my intro at the beginning. So I've been working for just over 2.5 years. I am in the actuarial sort of like consulting space at Deloitte, and yeah, thoroughly enjoying the work that we do. So consulting is a bit broader than your, I guess, traditional actuarial roles that you would normally hear of. So we work on a variety of problems that our clients bring to us, and it can range from anything from regulatory issues or issues around products that they have. So consulting really gives you that nice breadth of problems that you can solve across a variety of industries, be it life insurance, investments, and so on. So that's a bit about where I am at the moment. And yeah, I've only been working for 2.5 years, so I'm still also learning some of the lessons and picking up some of the challenges that anyone probably go through right now. So maybe just to touch on the challenges first. So with the actuarial profession, you have to write a lot of exams to be able to qualify as an actuary. And I mean, I think currently there's over 10 exams or so, and they are pretty challenging. So if you're a person that probably hasn't failed before, it is not unreasonable to sort of fail one of these exams, and it's completely normal. I think the exams themselves are pretty difficult for a particular reason, but it's really possible to get through them if you consistently work hard and also reach out for support when you can. And the second challenge that I've experienced in my short career is balancing my career, studying, as well as the other important areas of my life. So I don't think we're one-dimensional people that just focus on careers and studying. We also like to spend time with our family, spend time with friends, and also enjoy life and enjoy our hobbies. So I've found it quite challenging to, not challenging, but I've had to be a bit more intentional, I guess, about the amount of time I spend on certain activities and able to compromise here and there on certain activities. So that balance can be pretty tricky, but it's really, really possible to get it right. For example, some people would prefer studying early in the morning, knowing that late in the evening they'll spend time with family. Some people will maybe study on weekends only while they do a lot of social activities and their hobbies during the week. So it's really possible to yeah, be intentional about how you spend your time and make sure you can balance the things that are important to you. And then in terms of rewards, I think the biggest reward that I've found right now is that the career is very technically rewarding in the sense that you're solving a lot of problems. Like there's a variety of problems that the career allows you to solve. A great example, I guess, would be like the recent COVID-19 pandemic. I mean, we all know the negative impacts that came with, but from a career perspective, it opened up a lot of problems, I guess, for actuaries and actual professions to solve. So, for example, how to help insurers manage the risks associated with the pandemics, how to protect like individuals, like policyholders, and so forth. So yeah, it's a field that has a variety of problems that if you're someone that enjoys like solving problems, solving mathematical problems and statistical problems, you'd probably thoroughly enjoy it. And another reward is that I think the vastness in which you can practice as an actuary. So traditionally, most actuaries work in your sort of like life insurance space, but there's also been more actuaries moving into your short-term insurance, which is more of your car insurance industry, investments, and more in the non-traditional roles such as data science and banking. So I think the breadth of industries in which you can practice in make the career very exciting, and I think also gives you a sense of what's it called? Like the sense that you will always be employed, or you always have a great chance of being employed. So yeah, I think those are the two rewards. So some people always talk about there's opportunities to travel and so on. So I haven't really experienced those yet, but I can definitely see those being opportunities available. And yeah, I think I'll stop there for now. And yeah, I think I'm happy to take questions at the end. But yeah, over to you, Justin.
Thank you, we're going to move straight on to our next panelist. Mr. Andrew Collin is not joining us live in this panel meeting. But Tandwe, just mute your mic. There we go. So Andrew Collin, we're going to just play a video presentation from his side, but just to read an introduction. Andrew Collin matriculated from Selborne College in 2001, where he was the custodian of the key, the head boy, and the ducks of the school in his matric year. He completed his Bachelor of Accounting and Bachelor of Accounting Honours degree at Stellenbosch in 2004 and 2005, and qualified as a chartered accountant through SAICA in 2008. He has 16 years of experience with PwC and Deloitte, delivering audit services to private businesses and listed companies in South Africa, the US, the UK, and Australia. Andrew is currently an audit director with Melbourne, or in Melbourne for Deloitte, Australia, and has a keen focus on the automotive sector. Andrew was also my manager when I worked at PwC briefly in East London. So we will hear what my former boss has to say about his journey now. If we can play his video.
Hi everyone, I'm Andrew Collin. I'm based in Melbourne in Australia. I'm sorry that I can't be there with you for the live session today. So I'm a chartered accountant and I work for Deloitte in Australia. I'd say the first thing to kick off is the career options as a CA are really wide and varied, and it's probably one of the first challenges one faces is deciding which path to go down. So firstly, there's careers in professional services where one can become a specialist in audit, accounting, tax, or consulting, which again can be really varied. Alternatively, you can go into a career in commerce, so work for a company as an accountant or a finance manager, and long-term leadership positions there include roles such as chief financial officer or finance director or even the CEO. There's also a lot of opportunities within government and public sector as an accountant, also not-for-profits, and finally a number of entrepreneurs also have backgrounds as CAs, because it does give one a good foundation in the principles of business. So myself, I chose to go into professional services and to become a specialist auditor. So as auditors, we're engaged to report on company financial statements and essentially to issue an opinion as to whether the financial statements give a true and fair view of the financial position and the financial results of the company for the year. So the role we play is important in building public trust, because the financial statements produced by companies get relied upon by investors and shareholders and other interested parties to make financial decisions, and having that audit report provides them with some assurance that the results are reliable. So a little bit about me. I matriculated from Selborne in 2001. I studied down in Stellenbosch, and then I returned to East London to work for PwC, where I did my articles and got my CA qualification, and then I stayed on with them as a manager. I had some really good international work opportunities. I did a short-term secondment to the US in 2011 and 12. Which really opened my eyes as to just the scale of the US and the global economy, and also the opportunities available. And then eventually I took on a role with PwC in the UK, where I was based from 2014 to 2017. Again, had some really great experience there, working on big global businesses and working through some really complex accounting matters. And then an opportunity came up to work with Deloitte in Australia, which I ended up taking, and I've been over here in Australia for the last 5 years, and currently working my way up to becoming an audit partner with Deloitte over here. Just thinking back on my career so far, probably some of the highlights have been just being in professional services. I think it's a really high performance environment, and there's constant learning opportunities and challenges, and you get to work with a variety of really smart people. I also get to work across a portfolio of clients. I'm not just working with one company. I'm working across a number of different industries, so there's always something new coming up, or something new on the horizon to think about. Like I mentioned, there's the travel opportunities. The CA qualification does travel well, so if you're interested in that, it does open up a lot of doors for you. And I think I might just before I wrap up, just leave you with a few little things to think about. If you are considering a career in accounting, is really to go out and have as many conversations as you can with people working in the space, just to get their perspectives. And also say, once you're at university, try get some work experience just over the holidays to see what things are like actually on the ground and in the day-to-day. And then probably the other thing just to think about is that getting the CA is really the first step in the career. It really starts from there. So the technical qualification gets you in the door, but the things that will really help you with long-term success are the softer skills. So being able to build good relationships with the people you work with and your clients or customers, having leadership skills, because inevitably you're going to need to lead a team of people. And also it can't underplay just good communication skills. So being able to write well, being able to communicate an argument or a position, those are all really valuable skills and things to constantly be working on. And lastly, like I said, there's a lot of CAs out there in the world. It's a competitive market. So once you choose the path you want to go down, I really encourage you just to commit and go hard. Like I said, it is competitive, but if you work hard and if you work smart, it can be a really rewarding and an enjoyable career. Again, sorry that I can't be there with you for the live session, but I'm happy to, if you'd like, I'm on LinkedIn. You feel free to contact me, or I'm sure the organizers can share my email address if you'd like to get in touch. I'd be happy to answer any questions offline or separately. Thanks everyone, and have a good day.
Thank you, Andrew. Certainly well-traveled, US, UK, Australia. It certainly speaks to the doors that get opened when you hold a chartered accountancy degree, or actuarial science for that matter, that the world is really your oyster. And if you are keen to travel the world and seek out employment opportunities all over the show, there is a very good chance of you getting that. So thank you for enlightening us there, Andrew. Right, we then move on to Mr. Ian Williamson, who I have not yet met, but I've heard lots of good things, and I'm going to read out his bio as to what Ian has accomplished in his journey. Mr. Ian Williamson matriculated from Selborne College in 1987 and was a Rotary Exchange student in 1988. He then went on to the UCT and completed his B.Buzz.C, or his Actuarial Science degree, in 1992. Ian has spent his whole career at Old Mutual, qualifying as an actuary in 1995. He has spent time in the Cape Town, Johannesburg, and London offices. Ian is an experienced life insurance general manager and actuary. Specific experience in general management, M&A, financial management, IT, there we go, and strategy. Strong interest in private equity and alternative investments as well. He is currently the Group CEO of Old Mutual, having been appointed in 2020. Ian is married with 4 children. He's a cycling and fishing enthusiast. Do you have time to go cycling and fishing, Ian, amongst all your things to do?
You make time. You make time for everything.
I'll hand over to
Okay, guys. Thanks, Justin, and hello, everyone. Great to be here. Really pleased to be able to participate in this webinar. I think compared to some of the other guys who've spoken so far, I guess Adrian and I are talking with a much longer perspective. We're quite a bit older, I think, than the others. So yeah, as Justin has mentioned, I came back from Australia as an exchange student, having been pretty clear by then that I did want to do actuarial. When I left school, I wasn't yet sure, to be honest. And I think for me, there were 3 whys to that. One was I really enjoyed problem solving. The other was my spark academic subject was very much maths. I was good at science and accounting and all of those good things as well, but very much mathematical. And just to embrace the challenge of it, the actuarial qualification had a reputation of being really difficult, and I sort of was motivated by the challenge rather than put off by the challenge, I guess. I think so I actually went to UCT on a bursary given to me by Old Mutual, and my bursary interview was conducted by Adrian's older brother, who's also an Old Selbornian, as it happened. So it's just another interesting link, and Adrian's brother Brian now lives in Boston, and I'm actually still in touch with him. Every time I go to the US, I'll pop in and say hello. I think what the actuarial qualification gives you, and I think it's similar in some respects from what some of the accounting guys have been saying, is it gives you a really good grounding in what I would call financial engineering across a range of disciplines and a range of industries. So you really get to understand the guts of what makes insurance work, what makes pensions work, how does it work over time, what are the critical ingredients and critical success factors. So you can choose to either be involved in the really technical detail of developing products or designing things, or you can play a wider, more generalist role and have the appreciation of what is happening in the detail, both of which are very valuable and very helpful. Global demand significantly exceeds global supply for actuarial skills. So both in South Africa and globally, demand exceeds supply quite significantly. So you're always in demand. I think the point was made earlier, you're not going to be short of work, and you can, to some extent, choose what you would like to do within the discipline. For me, the highlights of my career so far, and I've been working for very close to 30 years, so it's a long time. I'm matriculated almost 35 years ago. The first and biggest thing is variety, and that's somewhat linked to my personality. I get bored very easily. and tend to kind of start becoming, actually, my teachers would probably tell you, tends to become quite disruptive if I'm getting bored. So it helps to be challenged and to constantly have new problems to solve. And that variety comes in a number of forms. Over my career, I've worked in product design, finance, mergers and acquisitions, and corporate finance, technology, sales and distribution, analytics and operations, and then I guess more general business leadership, running both business units within Old Mutual as well as now being the group CEO. So there's plenty of variety available, even though I've only worked for one corporate entity. I've never done one job for longer than, I think my record is 4 years in a role, and that was a pretty complicated one. But in general, it's been between 2 and 3 in most roles that I've played. And then I've been tended to be asked to do something else largely. And that served me well in terms of giving me a very broad base of things that I've got involved in. The other area of variety is a geographic and a market one. So, during my career, I've lived in South Africa and the UK and in different cities in South Africa, which, you need to decide whether that's what you want from a family point of view, because I think once family comes along, that becomes a significant decision point. But it certainly does give you perspective. I think someone spoke earlier about the opening up of your horizons in terms of working in international markets. And it brings a level of excitement and an opportunity to travel beyond your home base of where you live, much more cost effectively. So having lived in London, and actually in the 4 years I lived in London, my body clock pretty much lived in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean between the US and the UK. So I was on planes virtually every week, backwards and forwards. So I've never actually lived in the US, but I've spent cumulatively over my life, I've spent a few years in the US, but I've never lived there. So if you add up the weeks, it amounts to well over a couple of years. And then obviously I've worked from a home base of South Africa. I've worked pretty much across the African continent. So I've spent fair chunks of time in Nairobi, Lagos, Accra, Harare, Windhoek, and obviously in South Africa. So, significant African presence. And then I've spent a chunk of time in Asia. So we have a Chinese subsidiary. Before COVID, I was going to Beijing 3 or 4 times a year. And long ago, I did some corporate finance work in places like the Philippines and Indonesia and what have you. So it's there's certainly plenty of global exposure opportunity available. And I think the other point, and my last point that I really want to reinforce, which has been said, I think, by just about everybody, is that your initial choice really gives you that grounding. But what you do with it can be dramatically varied. Both actuarial and accounting give you lots of flexibility in terms of the base that you start from. Critically, I think in order to really be successful, you need to embrace the concept of lifelong learning. I think I'm still learning new things every day. There's a lot that happens and a lot of things that develop and move over time. And in particular, the softer skills are critical. So the financial services industry at large is fundamentally a people industry. I think that point's been made. And most accountants and actuaries end up in some form of financial services. There are exceptions. Obviously, the CFO of a civil engineering company that builds roads is going to be facing very different challenges, or the CFO of a mining company. But by and large, those who choose to work in financial services, it's an abstract industry. You're basically working with data, tech, and people. There isn't much else to it. There's no big machinery to worry about. There's no factories to worry about. It very much is a people industry. So the quality of your relationships, your ability to galvanize a team, to deliver with passion is important. So I think that's where the leadership element comes in, and the softer skills are really probably actually become more important as you advance in your career, and the technical skills become less important. So it's just one of those things. But you know, as someone said earlier, you can't connect the dots going forward, but certainly going backwards you can. And I must say I'm delighted with the choice that I made. I think it's worked out really well for me. I've enjoyed every minute of it. I expect to enjoy it for a good number of years to come, and certainly no shortage of challenges. But ultimately, you know, what really gets you out of bed in the morning, or at least what gets me out of bed in the morning, is a real excitement about the end result for making a difference in lives of customers and lives of people out there. The internal technical stuff is interesting, but actually if it doesn't have an impact on people and positively move the world forward, what's the point? So I'm a big believer in the fundamental reason for the existence essentially of the industry that I work in, and the role that we play in the broader economy and in the lives of people. And that for me is the real motivator ultimately over a long period of time. That's it for me.
Thank you, Ian. Just a random question, Ian. Who was your maths teacher at Selborne College?
Mrs. Mandy, actually not Max Norman. Funny. So Carl Mandy's mom. Carl is now tax part of PwC.
I'll tell Mrs. Mandy that we had a chat, and I'm sure she'd love to hear what you've been up to. Okay, so thank you, Ian. We're gonna move on to Mr. Adrian Basker. I suppose I shouldn't say the oldest of all of us, but by a few years he goes ahead of Ian. So Adrian, with the most experience, let's phrase it that way. Let's just read your intro. Mr. Adrian Basker matriculated from Selborne College in 1981. He completed his undergraduate degree from the University of Cape Town and qualified as a fellow of the Institute of Actuaries. Over 30 years of experience in the insurance industry, it's included more than 20 years in health insurance. Adrian has been active within the actuarial profession for many years in the UK, South Africa, and internationally. South Africa, he's the president of the Actuarial Society of South Africa from 2005 to 2007, and also had 6 years on that council. Internationally, he's just completed 4 years as the chair of the International Actuarial Association Health Section. He led their pandemics task force during when we were looking into the future of pandemics. In the UK, he served on the Institute and Faculty of Actuaries Council and a founder member of the very influential COVID-19 Actuaries Response Group, which I'm sure had lots on their hands in recent years. Employment, also having worked for Bupa in the UK since 2011, the largest health insurer in the world outside the USA. He's now currently the Chief Commercial Actuary at Bupa and was previously the Chief Actuary for Bupa in the UK and international markets. He's lived and worked in South Africa until moving to the UK in 2009, and he received an actuarial bursary from Old Mutual in 1986, back in the day, and has since worked for Old Mutual for 25 years until he made the move to Bupa both in South Africa and the UK. Adrian has spoken at numerous conferences on health issues and most recently on many occasions about COVID-19. So Adrian, we're hearing a lot of medical references here, so I'm presuming your actuarial background has taken you down that channel, but it'll be interesting to hear your story if you'd like to share with us, Adrian.
Thanks very much, Justin. Can I begin a little bit unconventionally? I'd like to dedicate my participation tonight to the memory of my late father, who sadly passed away a couple of days ago in East London, and I'm actually in East London at the moment. My father was also an old boy. He matriculated in 1947. So you talk about back in the day, that was really back in the day. So first reflection on my career was at Selborne. I had inspirational teachers, and my maths teacher was Max Norman. And my actuarial career was inspired by two things. Number one, as Ian mentioned, my older brother, was pursuing actuarial studies at the time and maybe it was sibling rivalry, but I decided I'm going to do this too. But also I had an inspirational teacher like Max who lit the fire. I remember he gave us a maths problem that's insoluble, and there's still no solution to that problem today. But I wasted many hours trying to solve it. But I think the important point was I learned about problem solving, and that's the key part of being an actuary, is solving problems. In my CV, I didn't mention that while I was studying to be an actuary, and then after qualification, I was to spend 15 years as a cricket statistician, doing cricket statistics for SABC TV and a little bit for the BBC, and spent another lot of wasted hours trying to solve the problem of how do you resolve a rain-interrupted cricket match. Before I could come up with a solution, Mrs. Duckworth-Lewis solved the problem, so a bit of a waste for me. But I think the key lesson here is, in order to solve problems, you sometimes need to think outside the box, and I'd say you can take that whatever career you go into. Always try and think outside the box. Another formative moment for me was at university when I failed an exam. It was my first actuarial exam, and the professor at the time said, "Adrian, you're wasting your time. Don't try and be an actuary. Go and do something else." And I decided to prove him wrong. And that's a key part of being an actuary, is determination to succeed. And I was just determined to prove him wrong. I never failed another exam. I was not the cleverest in my class, but I was the first in my class to qualify as an actuary. So don't listen to people who give you destructive feedback. It's just a waste, would be my second key message. My third comment is, and my CV talks about international involvement, is it's just to cherish diversity. In my typical working day, I might start the day with a call to an actuary who works for me in Cairo, Egypt. I then would speak to colleagues in Dubai. I have an actuarial team in Dublin, Ireland, that I might be talking to as well. I then might do a sales pitch for an international health insurance arrangement for a corporate in Singapore or Hong Kong. And then because of my professional involvement with the International Actuarial Association, I may have a meeting that involves working and talking to actuaries in America, Australia, and South Africa, as it happens. So I think I'm being fortunate throughout my career to have a lot of international exposure and just to experience diversity. Working internationally, being exposed to international people broadens your mind, and I think in my experience, South Africans are more willing to engage with external opinions and actually to learn internationally. And the lesson there is just to adapt to change and adapt to cultures. I've seen businesses fail because they've tried to impose their business model on a market that they just don't understand. So I've worked like Ian quite a lot internationally. I've done work with businesses in Hong Kong, India, was involved in buying a business for Bupa in Turkey, setting up a company in Ireland ahead of Brexit, because our UK business could not sell into Europe after Brexit. A little bit of work through Saudi Arabia. In my old mutual days, some work in Bermuda, Brazil, USA. So pretty diverse. In terms of career highlights, probably running out of time. Bupa is a really big company. Our UK business brings in £2.5 billion worth of revenue a year. You can multiply that by 20 to convert that to rands. So really big business, and my job is responsible for setting the prices to bring in that £2.5 billion pounds of revenue. We typically push up prices about 10% each year. So that's about £250 million worth of revenue that I'm personally responsible for each year. one of my highlights, I think COVID, much as it was a tragedy for many people, was something that gave me a new lease of life in my career. It started when my CEO, someone like Ian, called me up and said, "There's this thing happening in China. I want to know how much is it going to cost? How much is it going to cost Bupa? And I need a board paper in 48 hours." And most of the modeling work that I do is I have staff to do that, but it was something that I really needed to do quickly. So I really quickly built a model, and in 48 hours I had Bupa's first COVID model. And actually my predictions weren't that far off. The twist in the tail here is actually COVID was very good for Bupa financially, in that it led to us making extraordinary profits. And what I'm really proud of is that because of the modeling that I did, we came to the conclusion that any profits that we make out of COVID, we ought to give back to our customers. And I'm proud to say that as a result of decisions that I drove, we gave £125 million back to our customers last year, as effectively as a rebate. That's something I'm really proud of. The purchase of the company in Turkey was also something I'm really proud of. At Old Mutual, I also did quite a lot of work, set up the oxygen medical scheme at Old Mutual, which was pretty innovative. We had this thing where we gave children free cover, free insurance cover, and it was an innovation in the industry. I developed a bond index fund at Old Mutual with the National Union of Mine Workers, which again just illustrates the diversity of the kinds of things that you as an actuary can do. And then I was also involved in the sale of Old Mutual's business in the US. Not sure if I worked with Ian on that, but we probably tackled different parts of that transaction. My final comment is, this is all about actuaries and accountants, and you spoke about age, and you're never too old to learn, because over the last 9 months or so, I decided to learn something new. I did a course at Oxford University on artificial intelligence, and artificial intelligence and machine learning is very closely akin to the work of what actuaries and accountants do. It is the next frontier. And if you're interested in mathematics and you don't want to be an accountant, and you think actuarial is too boring as well, go for it in terms of data science and machine learning, because that's where the future is. Back to you, Justin.
There we go. Right, thank you, Adrian. Just in the last 10 or so minutes of our session tonight, we're just going to ask each one of you one question. If time allows it, we'll ask a second one, but just to touch base with each of you with a question. We do also have a question that's been posted as well that we can also put to you all. So I'm just going to check if Patandwa is still with us. Patandwa, are you able to answer a question for us?
Yeah, I'm still here, Justin.
Just a question, you being still early into your career, a question that you can maybe just touch on in a short little answer. How close is the work you do today, or how close is it, the work you do today, to what you imagined it to be when you started?
Very, very close. I think currently in my current role, I do a lot of the technical work. So I think it's a lot more around model building. It's around about analyzing results. So it's very close to what I thought it was. I think, yeah, I haven't really any surprises from what I've learned. I think also you kind of see the possibilities that the career can sort of have for you to do other pieces of work. So that's maybe something I didn't have at the back of my mind back at high school. But yeah, very closely related to what I thought it was, yeah.
Okay. There we go. Thank you, Patandwa, and thanks for joining us this evening. A question for Rohin Jain. To what extent are you able to apply what you learned in your studies to the world of work? Was there a close link between the two, or have you had to learn a lot of things actually in practice?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. I think, you always think that what you study is going to be exactly what you do at work, but it's never really the case. I think it sets a good foundation for you to understand the material, but once you start working, I think there's a whole lot of terminology that you're not familiar with, and I think it's always about learning. I think even the higher seniors, like, they're still learning as well. I think so. It's important because it sets a foundation, it sets the basics, but it's always about learning. It's always about thinking about a problem in a different way.
Great, thank you. Then for Mr. Yandise Kuana, a question that's been posed to you. Do developments in artificial intelligence and information technology make your work easier or more complicated?
Great question. I think most people would say easier, but also there's a balance, because at the end of the day, you also work with people, and some of those technologies could actually replace some people. So it's actually finding the balance. And I think most people look at it as technology sort of replacing people. But I think for me, I look at it as sort of it helping people. So the two can always work side by side. But I think for us, it really does allow us to be much more efficient, to deliver services better to the client at the end of the day, and to work solutions around faster. So ultimately, artificial intelligence and data technologies and developments, IoTs, all of these things really do eventually help us to do our jobs much better and develop better solutions for our clients at the end of the day.
Another question for you, Yandise, that's come through on our chat, and it's one that I often answer with the learners in my class. Matriculating, if you want to become a chartered accountant one day, and going full-time studies into a university as opposed to working at the same time and learning via correspondence. Just brief thoughts on that.
Yeah, I probably have, my opinion will come from a biased view, having done sort of going through university, but I think I also did a mixture of the two, because I completed my postgraduate studies while I was actually working at PwC. So I think on the one end, if you go straight into the workplace, I think you gain the work experience from the get-go. So by the time your peers are finished studying, you've already sort of gained the critical skills that you need, and then you're also doing your work at the same time. But I think on the other end is that you miss out on the university experience and kind of what that brings and what that builds into you in terms of you becoming holistic. So I think for me, if I had to choose, I'd probably go with the university option and then ultimately go into the workplace option. But I think, yeah, it's really up to the person and what kind of works for you. And Justin, I'm sure you can sort of answer that with some of your experience as well. I don't think it's an easy question to really answer. It does depend on preferences, and each side has its merits.
And I think a lot of the big firms, be it in banking or in accounting firms and assurance firms, they largely will tend to accept young students who have finished their degrees and then take them once they've completed their honours. That's if you're looking for a smaller company, then they probably can do it the other way. But thank you for your thoughts there, Yandise. I think Adrian might have exited the meeting, but Ian is still with us. And I've got a complicated sounding question here for you, Ian, so I'm going to read it carefully. It's surrounding the COVID effects and the impacts of COVID. Did COVID have a serious impact or destabilize future strategic planning models? And what sectors was strategic planning models most affected?
There we go. Okay, sorry, I couldn't get the mute button to go off. That is a complicated question. COVID has had a massive impact on almost all aspects of society. When you think about it from a social cohesion perspective, in our industry, the number of deaths we saw was enormous. And just the human suffering that went with it, but equally, to work models. So, you know, as a corporate, we employ 30,000 people across the continent. We've gone into a hybrid working model. So we used to be in the office 5 days a week, 40 hours a week plus. You know, we are very much not like that anymore. It's a much more flexible model. However, from a strategic point of view, to go to that question, I'm not sure it's bigger than some of the other issues that we grapple with. So for me, climate change is a bigger issue to grapple with. The impact on the short-term insurance industry of flooding and extreme weather events is absolutely enormous. It's very difficult to predict. It's one of the more challenging actuarial modeling kind of issues out there at the moment. And COVID has got some similarities. I think it's still too early to say whether it's going to have a long-term impact on death rates around the world from either from long COVID or from the hangover effects of recurring infections, etc. It'll play out, you know, it'll play out. But I think the geopolitical consequences, I think, are the bigger issue. You know, it appears the world is sort of, the world power balance is tilting eastward. And so, you know, China's approach to dealing with COVID clearly very different to the rest of the world. And that sort of, in a sense, I think there's a bit of an ideological battle playing out at the moment in terms of what the dominant paradigm for the next few generations is going to end up being. It's not directly related to COVID, but I think you can see it playing out there. So I mean, it's a long-winded way of saying, yes, COVID is a big deal. It's not underestimated, but I think there's quite a few other even bigger deals that are playing out right now. Russia, Ukraine, what's going on in China, and the possibility of a China-Taiwan conflict, and the, you know, Italy yesterday gave a speech basically saying that they effectively been much more explicit that in a sense Russia's strategy is to get the world back onto, you know, almost a dependency on hard assets rather than financial assets, and that suits China's game plan, because Russia's game plan, because obviously they've got all the oil reserves, etc. But that would be a disaster for many others in the world. So I think there's a lot going on at the moment which is in flux, which makes it very, very difficult to do real long-term strategic planning without scenarios. You need scenarios, and you think about different possibilities and kind of try to navigate your way through.
Yeah. No, thank you, Ian. I think we're just going to...
Justin, it's Adrian. Just to say, I managed to get back on the phone. So I'm listening.
Is that you, Adrian?
Yeah, I'm on the phone.
Okay. You
can't get back on the video.
No, that's fine. I've got one question for you as well, Adrian. You've got lots of experience in international markets and that, but just in a nutshell, how easy is it for actuaries to work in different countries? One of our questions.
I think it's a great career for someone who is looking to work in different countries. There are probably about 60,000 actuaries worldwide, which is not a lot when you think about a career. And it's probably every actuary that wants to work can get a job pretty easily. At the moment, it's a really heated market. And the skills are pretty transferable. The actuarial qualifications, there's something called mutual recognition agreements, which are agreements between the different actuarial examining bodies around the world. That if you have got an American qualification, you can go work in the UK, or the South African qualification, you can go work in Australia. So the skills are pretty transferable, and I think Ian, in his last answer, referred to how COVID has changed the way people work. People are all working virtually and remotely anyway, so you can work internationally by living somewhere, or you can do international work sitting in your lounge behind your computer.
Thank you, Adrian. Okay, I think we pretty much reached the end of our session, but I just thought we'd end off with maybe a question for Yandisa, and maybe we'll just go back to Ian as well, just to answer this last question. So Yandisa, a high school learner, maybe he's 15 or 16, comes up to you and he says, Mr. Kuana, what does a chartered accountant do? What is your simplest 1 or 2 sentences answer that can tell this child what a CA does?
Whew, probably everything. Yeah, I think that's quite a difficult question to answer because of the broad career options that you have as a CA. But I think ultimately it's about giving confidence. I think whether it's in tax, whether it's in accounting, whether it's in law, whatever it is that the person does, it's about giving confidence to the greater market around that everything has been done according to, I guess, the letter of the law in conjunction with the accounting standards, with the law, with the regulations, etc., etc. So a very difficult question to answer, but yeah, that's probably the simplest one I can think of. If we had someone more experienced like Andrew, might give a better answer.
No, thank you. I think if you go into too much detail, that 15-year-old is not going to know what's happening.
Yeah.
But Ian, same question to you, but he wants to know, what does an actuary do, Mr. Williamson?
Yeah, I saw that hospital pass coming. Yeah, I think the simplest answer is actuaries apply mathematical and analytical techniques to solve very complicated problems. That's essentially the guts of it. And the applications are very broad. So a number of examples around, for example, modeling the future of the COVID pandemic, or coming up with an index for assets on the stock exchange, or dealing with the likelihood of car accident damage in the future are examples that sort of illustrate the sort of things that we get involved in. But I think the underlying thing is really a set of technical and mathematical skills applied to solving problems, long-term, future-dated, forward-looking problems. Yeah.
Yes, I was about to say that I'd often been explained that an actuary will use current information to predict and foresee events in the future, where possibly a CA is examining current information of what has happened. That's how I've always explained it, whether I was right or wrong, but by what you just said now, Ian, it does sound like actuaries are looking forward. Gentlemen,
yeah,
thank you so much.
Other than the fact that we don't make any profits, you know.
Thank you so much for joining us for the webinar tonight. I trust that you all enjoyed your time as we chatted together. I'm biased teaching accounting and having gone through PwC myself back in the day, that this is the most important webinar of all of them, but I'm sure they're equal in other eyes. But thank you so much for joining us tonight. We look forward to hearing more of what you will do in the years to come, and maybe to meet up at a reunion in the next few years. Let's see. But thank you for your time, and for those working behind the scenes on the webinar, thank you for your efforts as well. But yes, have a good evening, and hopefully we will hear about your work in the future. Okay, good evening, everyone. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye.
everybody.